Well, 60. 60? I'm sure he's got that wrong. No, he hasn't. 60 minutes of extra time left. Oh, they can't believe it. That is incredible.
The football's not over until we say so. Catch the highlights of Charlton v Newcastle and get the last word on the weekend's action. Match of the Day 2, new for Sundays tonight 10:30 on BBC Two.
Call this number now or log on to get your free pack of fundraising ideas. Swearing not being one of them.
Night balloons, you know.
Now on BBC One, the news with Jane Hill.
The biggest shake-up of education in England for 50 years. A-levels and GCSEs could be replaced with a single diploma. Ministers prepare a statement on the movement of British troops in Iraq. Thousands of people turn out to cheer our triumphant Olympic rowers. And on Panorama After the News, Raggy Omar asks why so many youngsters are carrying and using knives, and he talks to some whose lives have been scarred. Hello, good evening. GCSE exams and A-levels could be scrapped in England and replaced with a diploma if the recommendations in a major review of secondary education are implemented. The proposals from the former Chief Inspector of Schools, Mike Tomlinson, are published tomorrow. Our education correspondent, Mike Baker, reports.
And this is where you do some bricklaying and some painting, decorate. Which bit are you on at the moment?
Mike Tomlinson looks relaxed for someone planning a huge shake-up of school exams. He says it's needed to improve school leavers' basic skills, to put higher value on vocational courses and to stretch the brightest. So GCSEs and A-levels will give way to a new 4-level diploma. There'll be tests of core skills, English, maths and computing, which everyone must pass to get a diploma. But generally there'll be less coursework and fewer formal exams, with more assessment done by teachers. And there'll be a new A+ and A++ grades for the advanced diploma to distinguish between the brightest.
It is a huge change because it's radical. It's not tinkering with the system, and I think it's what's needed. And so, of course, there are mixed reactions and there are concerns about the gold standard of A-level. But for most students, they don't do A-level. So therefore, if the majority of students can be better served by another system, then I think there'll be a lot of support for it.
Employers welcome the boost for vocational courses, which can be taken alongside academic subjects, but say the big test is whether Tomlinson tackles students' basic skills.
And employers are picking up the pieces. We know that half our members are dissatisfied with the basic skills of school leavers, and a third of them are having to provide them with remedial training. So it's a big problem to address.
Although A-levels would cease to be separate qualifications, they'd remain as components of the advanced diploma. But this morning, the Conservatives surprised everyone by saying they'd return to the old system of fixed quotas for those getting top grades.
Our proposal that Michael Howard will be announcing tomorrow is that actually we should go back to the system we had until 20 years ago, whereby you can only get an A grade if you're in the top 5 or 10% by ability in that year group.
But a head teachers leader has said that would be a backward step, denying many students who'd reached A-grade level of the recognition they deserved. Mike Baker, BBC News.
The Defence Secretary Geoff Hoon will make a statement to the House of Commons tomorrow about the American request for British troops to extend their area of operations in Iraq. It's thought the US wants British soldiers to be deployed near Baghdad under American command so that their troops can join combat operations elsewhere. Well, it comes after a day of heavy fighting between US forces and insurgents in the rebel stronghold of Fallujah. Let's get more from our political correspondent John Pienaar in Westminster tonight. So, John, we hear from Geoff Hoon tomorrow. How much are we likely to hear, do you think?
Well, he's going to be telling the House of Commons about this American request for something over 600 British troops to fill in behind American forces while they're away fighting insurgents in Fallujah. Now, no decisions have been taken, and it's stressed that this will be taken on military grounds, on military advice. But a decision as sensitive as this one, it'll have to be taken with the direct approval of not only Geoff Hoon, but also the Prime Minister.
Yes, and not an area without difficulties and problems either.
There's the question of control, of course. These British forces, if they're deployed there, will be under a British chain of command. command under British rules of engagement and British law, but they'll be operating in an American-controlled region. That's why the Conservatives are saying they need rules of engagement to deal with any eventuality. And some others against the war from the start are saying, well, is this some sort of American cover to give George Bush political cover in the run-up to the election? Now, that's very strongly denied by ministers and senior staff, but clearly it's felt in government. This is a request it would be very hard to say no to, and equally, I think, quite a challenge for the British government. It would be a new, politically dangerous and also militarily risky stage in Britain's involvement in Iraq.
John, thanks very much. Well, the British ambassador in Baghdad has appealed in Arabic for information to help recover the body of the British hostage Ken Bigley. Mr. Bigley was murdered a week ago after being held for 3 weeks. An emergency phone number has been set up to encourage Iraqis to give information on the whereabouts of his body. There's concern within the Anglican Church that a report aimed at mending divisions about the issue of homosexuality may deepen them. The report will be published tomorrow by the Lambeth Commission, set up a year ago after the ordination of the gay American Bishop Gene Robinson. His appointment has deeply divided the Liberal and Conservative wings of the Church. Here's our religious affairs correspondent, Robert Piggott.
Traditionalist Anglicans at St Peter's in Harold Wood in Essex believe the Bible rules out gay priests. Today they were hoping and praying that the Lambeth Commission could defuse the crisis over homosexuality. But that doesn't mean they're ready to compromise.
Our unity is to be found in the faith of the gospel, in the faith of the scriptures. That is our unity, that's how we're to live together, that's how the mission of the church has always gone forward and does today.
Traditionalists want the American Church suspended for ordaining the gay bishop Gene Robinson. The Lambeth Commission may ask the Americans to apologise for the hurt that caused. Its report is also expected to call for all the world's independent Anglican churches to sign a binding agreement of shared beliefs. There could be a special tribunal to decide punishments for churches who step out of line.
We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ.
At Southwark Cathedral today, a recitation of the Creed, the core beliefs of Anglicans. But liberal congregations like this fear the Commission will make a ban on ordaining gay clergy part of Anglicanism.
If the Commission proposes some hard-edged orthodoxy about never ever ordaining gays as bishops or never ever consecrating women as bishops, then I think there is going to be very significant difficulty throughout the world.
It seems inevitable that the world's 38 independent Anglican churches will be asked to give up at least some of their jealously guarded autonomy to prevent an irrevocable split. If, as seems likely, some of them refuse to do so, then what may be the last best hope of keeping the Anglican communion intact will be lost. Robert Piggott, BBC News, Southwark Cathedral.
There have been allegations of vote rigging in Belarus, where people are voting on whether the president should be allowed to stand for a third term. The former Soviet Republic gained independence in 1991. President Alexander Lukashenko was elected in 1994, but the current rules limit him to 2 terms in office. Mr. Lukashenko called a referendum in the hope that people will vote to abolish the presidential term limit. But concerns have been raised about the poll's legitimacy. From Belarus, Steve Rosenberg reports.
He's the man the US State Department describes as Europe's last dictator. Today, Alexander Lukashenko was voting to change the constitution and remain in power in Belarus. There's been fear in the West that the referendum might be rigged in Mr. Lukashenko's favor. He denies it.
President Lukashenko, how can you be certain that there is no cheating in this referendum?
It's time the West calmed down and stopped accusing us of violations and falsifications. You've got plenty of your own election problems to keep you busy.
But allegations of fraud are emerging. This is polling station 150 in the center of Minsk. The BBC's been shown these images from inside the polling station. The photographer's too scared to be identified. He says that when this woman arrived to vote, she was handed a ballot paper which had already been marked with a tick in support of President Lukashenko. He says he saw more marked papers on a table. We showed the pictures to Belarus's election chief. She said she thought they were false and described them as a provocation. President Lukashenko has ruled Belarus with an iron fist for the last 10 years, crushing dissent, controlling everything from the media to the economy. He says he wants to remain president for the good of the nation. Opponents say he simply can't conceive of losing power. The OSCE, who've been monitoring the vote, say they plan to investigate what happened at polling station 150. The organisation says that ahead of the referendum, it had serious concerns about the way in which the poll was organised.
Belarus may look like a normal European country, but it already has one of Europe's most authoritarian regimes. Today's allegations of vote rigging are likely to fuel suspicions in the West that the main aim of this referendum is to make Alexander Lukashenko president for life. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Minsk.
Detectives say 3 men who were found dead in a flat in Glasgow may have been murdered. Their bodies were found in a top-floor flat in the Govan Hill area of the city after a phone call to the police. Post-mortem examinations are now being carried out. Neighbours say they believe the flat was being used by 5 men. Sainsbury's is to create 3,000 jobs in its stores at the expense of managerial posts. Most of the new jobs are aimed at improving the availability of stock. At the same time, the company's chief executive, Justin King, is to cut about 700 head office positions. The company says it wants more manpower on the shop floor. America's presidential election race is entering its final fortnight, with the polls showing the candidates neck and neck, and the campaigning centred on a few crucial swing states. Both candidates have been on the campaign trail in 2 of the biggest this weekend, Ohio and Florida. If John Kerry wins all the states that Al Gore did 4 years ago, plus either of these, he would win the race for the White House. Justin Webb reports.
Is she hugging the next president of the United States? To the delight of John Kerry's supporters in the key state of Ohio, it could be true. Either candidate could win, which is why the rhythm of the electoral dance is speeding up. The moment of truth is arriving.
You get to vote not just for the President of the United States, you get to vote for the leader of the free world. And people all over the world are waiting to see whether we're going to get back in touch with the values of our country.
This evening, Mr. Kerry is visiting another up-for-grabs state, Florida. No surprise, President Bush has already been there this weekend. The polls suggest he's ahead in Florida, but by an uncomfortably thin whisker. He, too, is boiling it all down to values, principles.
At a time of great threat to our country, at a time of great challenge in the world, the Commander-in-Chief must stand on principle, not the shifting sands of political convenience.
In the nation's capital this afternoon, an anti-Bush rally drew some crowds, kept minds focused on political matters. Around the nation, passions on both sides are genuinely high, higher than anyone can remember in recent times. This surge of political interest and involvement, particularly in the closely fought swing states, is adding a whole new level of unpredictability to the outcome of the presidential race. The candidate who wins will probably be the candidate who manages to get the most of his new supporters, his new voters, to the polls on November the 2nd. Which candidate will that be? Nobody knows. Justin Webb, BBC News, Washington.
Now, with all the day's sports news, here's Hazel Irvine.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening to you. Newcastle have missed the chance to go 4th in the Premiership table, despite taking the lead against Charlton at the Valley today. Craig Bellamy put Graham Souness' side ahead in the first half, but in the end, Newcastle were a touch fortunate to hang on for a 1-1 draw. You can see why on Match of the Day 2 at 10:30 on BBC 2. Meanwhile, in Scotland, Croatian striker Dado Perso scored both of Rangers' goals in their 2-0 win over Motherwell at Fir Park. So the Ibrox side is once again 5 points behind rival Celtic in the Scottish Premier League. Now, the birthday celebrations are probably in full swing for Ernie Els after the big South African claimed the HSBC World Match Play title for a record 6th time. The world number 2 beat Lee Westwood 2-1 at Wentworth to claim the first prize of £1 million on his 35th birthday. He's now the most successful golfer in the event's 40-year history. The England tour to Zimbabwe looks almost certain to go ahead after an official inquiry cleared the host nation's cricket authorities of racism. Zimbabwean cricket has been in turmoil following a strike by 15 white players led by former captain Heath Streak, who made allegations of racism in April. England are due to tour there next month. Tomorrow, an estimated 200,000 people are expected to line the streets of central London to salute Britain's Olympic and Paralympic heroes. But today, our rowing medalists had a taste of things to come with a more local celebration at the home of their sport, Henley-on-Thames. Ollie Foster was there.
It's probably the last time he'll be doing this, so he made sure he was at the front of the bus for the rowers' Henley homecoming. All the team's medalists were on board, together again for the first time after their Olympic success.
It's been really special coming home to this kind of thing. You know, you get the feeling, of course, that the Olympics meant lots of things to different people.
It's going to be oh so close. Matthew drives.
His gold medal in the Coxless 4 produced one of the game's defining images. Not the photo finish with the Canadians, but his tears on the podium afterwards. Today, he was reunited with his crew. This is the first time the Coxless 4 have been back on the water since Athens. Matthew Pinsent is leaning towards retirement, but the temptation of a fifth gold medal in Beijing is still there.
You'll come down for a day's rowing like today and 40,000 people will turn out and you think, I'll easily do this again, It's still, you know, TBA.
Whilst he decides the rest of the squad should be motivated to carry on.
It's been an amazing turnout, really, really impressive. It's very flattering to see the support we've got back here.
There'll be more support when they join fellow Olympians in central London for another parade tomorrow. Ollie Foster, BBC News, Henley.
And you can watch the main Olympic parade tomorrow on BBC One live from 1:35 in the afternoon. That's it. Jane.
Thanks, Hazel. Well, crucially, let's find out whether it'll be good weather for that parade. Here's Helen Willett. Helen.
Jane, thank you. Probably the best day of the week, I'd say, at this stage for parading in London, because it looks like the sun will be shining, but thereafter the southeast may actually catch the heaviest rain this coming week. There's some uncertainty, but all of us will have some really rather unsettled weather. It stays rather chilly by both day and night. I'm glad to say day showers are starting to ease a little bit now, but they'll continue for northern Scotland, for the Norfolk coastline, and also across Pembrokeshire and Cornwall. But inland already it's starting to turn a little bit misty and chilly, and we'll have some ground frost again by morning. But the pockets of fog could get quite dense by morning, and they will linger, I think, through the rush hour. The most likely areas are where we've had some of the most frequent showers today, so the central belt of Scotland, northern parts of England, the Midlands and East Anglia, but I wouldn't like to rule it out just about anywhere. And it will be slow to clear tomorrow, so perhaps a bit of a disappointing start, also with some showers around the Manchester and Merseyside area through Pembrokeshire and Cornwall. But otherwise, it looks like the driest day of the week at the moment for England and Wales. Not bad at all either for eastern Scotland. Some respite here from the rain. However, further north and west, and for Northern Ireland too, the cloud thickens through the day, and that will bring some rain in. On and off, I think, so not particularly heavy except in the Highlands and the Islands, and it should hold off in eastern Scotland until after dark. So obviously it'll feel pretty disappointing here, just 10 or 11, but 12 or 13 further south should feel quite pleasant, particularly if you're out and about and you see some sunshine. Really just a rogue shower for England and Wales. Not a bad day at all. Jane.
Helen, thanks very much. Well, finally, a reminder of the main news tonight. GCSE exams and A-levels could be scrapped in England and replaced with a diploma if a major review of secondary education is implemented. That is the latest news tonight. Let me just tell you that after Panorama on BBC One in the northeast of England, you can see a debate about the plans for a regional assembly. And that'll be shown across the UK over on BBC News 24 at 11:15. But now here on BBC One, Panorama. Schools and communities across the country are having to face the reality that more and more youngsters are carrying and using knives. Raggy Omar has been finding out what's going on in our children's lives. The programme contains some disturbing images.